Hello, everyone, and welcome to my live. My name's Melissa Neal, and this is Dr. Natasha, my great friend, Dr. Natasha Ryan. Hi, Natasha, how are you doing?
I'm great. Hello, Melissa. Hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
It's great to see everybody. And first of all, I must apologize because this live was booked a number of weeks ago and then I had a virus. I actually completely lost my voice. So we're re-establishing the live now. And firstly, do let me know in the comments section, whereabouts you are in the world, because it's always fantastic to hear from you guys. What we're going to do with this live is we're going to be talking about menopause, we're going to be talking about hormones, and we're going to be talking about weight loss. So if you've got any questions about that, Dr. Natasha Ryan, she's here to answer those questions. I'm here to answer if any questions crop up as well, maybe about exercise and that kind of thing. And Dr. Natasha Ryan, well, I'll ask you, Doctor, tell us a bit about your background, because you're a doctor, but you're a naturopath doctor, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. So I have a doctorate in something called naturopathic medicine. I like to say that I'm a naturopathic doctor practicing functional medicine. And basically, what that means is my entire goal is to kind of help you get to the root cause of what is happening with you, right? I was pre-med in undergrad, and I had the opportunity to go to your regular traditional medical school, but I chose to kind of go down the path where health and wellness is the main focus of what I do. Finding the root cause is the main cause of what I do. So I'm really excited that I chose the path I did, and I'm glad to be here.
That is absolutely fantastic. And just to let you know, everyone, so Annette says she's live in Prescott, Arizona, in the USA. So welcome, Annette. That is absolutely fantastic. And I know I get a lot of guys from the USA, girls from the USA, but pretty much all over the world, which is really exciting. Dr. Natasha Ryan's actually based in the USA, aren't you? And
Yes.
so what she's going to be talking about today, you can actually have an opportunity to book a free consultation call with Dr. Natasha Ryan, which I must say must be worth its weight in gold. And I've actually put the link here on the screen, as you can see scrolling across. And I've actually put also a direct link just in the comments section. So you can just, use that link. You can actually just click it and go straight to Dr. Natasha Ryan's consultations course. So I would advise, because I think you're going to get pretty busy, Natasha, you probably try and do that during the live, and we're going to sort of take some questions. And just to reiterate, because I know just all of a sudden quite a few of you hopped on, so you might have missed the start. We're going to be talking about menopause. We're going to be talking about weight loss. We're going to be talking about perimenopause. We could be talking about Hashimoto's and thyroid issues, because Natasha actually has Hashimoto's. So, which then leads to hypothyroidism. So if you've got anything like that, I know I talk to tons of women that are having that, issue. And we're going to take questions on hormones. So if you've got any questions that you need answering, I can't promise that I will get to absolutely everyone, because it is usually a real challenge. But looking through, I'm just looking at where people are from. Hi from Ontario, Sherry. Jay Brady from Derbyshire, that's my neck of the woods. Well, not really my neck of the woods, because it's the other side of the UK. And Chantel is from the UK as well. So South Africa, Melia's from South Africa. So if you're looking to kind of have a one-to-one with Natasha, Natasha's based in the USA. I do believe that you can work with women in Canada as well. Is that right? So it's USA and Canada.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's really who it's for. But anybody from anywhere in the world can ask a question today. And I often ask, I wish I could use Dr. Natasha Ryan, but I'm based in the UK. So, it's a little bit difficult for me. So I'm going to take a question, or might be a comment even, from Kim RR. Hello, I'm 48 and working to lose weight. I'm going through menopause. So this is like a really, really common issue. I know for me, Natasha, I've sort of recently gone through menopause quite late because I'm 55. So I stopped having a really my menstrual cycle about a year ago, and that's literally we're classified as, we've gone through menopause. But I just wondered if you had any advice and tips about weight loss when you're actually maybe, actually currently going through menopause, sort of in perimenopause, that is, isn't it really?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about it. So, when we say the word menopause, really it's kind of a spectrum. So you have your perimenopause, which is like that time before you actually go through the actual menopause, which is, it could be anywhere from ages of 35 to 50, which can be a long time, right? The average age in the United States of menopause is 51 years old. And what that really means is that you have gone an entire year without having a period. Okay. And so after that, that's when you enter into postmenopause. So I'm not sure. It sounds like Kim may be in that perimenopausal phase where she may probably still is having a period, but it might be changing because a big part of perimenopause is when maybe you're not having your periods exactly on time. Maybe you have two periods, maybe you'll skip one. Things really start shifting in that kind of perimenopausal phase. A big shift in perimenopause is a change in the sleep pattern. And that within itself, right? I don't know how Kim is sleeping, but when your sleep patterns start to change, all of a sudden women start to realize that they are starting to gain weight. And that change in sleep pattern or that lack of sleep kind of shifts the hormones and it creates this kind of wave of weight gain, right? And that's typically because when you're not sleeping well at night, there's a hormone called ghrelin and it starts to increase. It's called a hunger hormone. And before you know it, you start having more cravings. You might actually start eating more calories, and or if you feel like you're not eating more calories, maybe your body is not metabolizing the food that you're eating as well as it did when you're in your 20s or early 30s. So these shifts that we start to see in that perimenopausal place, which is looks like where Kim is, really can start to change your body composition, right? Instead of having more muscle, you start to kind of get into more fat. So yeah, there's a lot happening within the different phases of menopause. And women, I hear that often, women start to notice changes in their weight for sure.
Yeah, and I'm just going to take another one here because this is so common no matter what age you are, over sometime over 40. And Nat Baker says, it seems no matter what I eat, I gain weight. I'm over 60.
Yeah.
Actually, what I will say in that before I ask Natasha to properly answer this question is you want to watch the YouTube that's coming up tomorrow on Sunday with somebody called, well, she's great, Cynthia Parrish. She's actually over 60. And I've done a whole video on what she did to lose weight, in particular belly fat, and how she did it. So watch that tomorrow. And then I'm going to ask Natasha to answer the question. Oh, sorry. I'll ask Natasha, so what's happening? Why can't we lose weight no matter what? And we're gaining weight.
Yeah, that is a source of frustration for many women, and I think that what one of there are a variety of reasons why it becomes a lot more difficult to lose weight, especially once you're kind of in menopause and beyond menopause. First, I think that the actual definition really of menopause, in addition to stopping having the period, is this kind of decline in hormones, especially estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. And when you have a big decline, especially in estrogen, you become more insulin resistant. And so we kind of have to talk a little bit about insulin resistance. And what that means is that, when you eat certain foods, insulin may kind of go up. and your body is not using it as efficiently. Your cells are not as sensitive to insulin. And so your blood sugars may start to go up. This is why a lot of women kind of, once they kind of go through menopause, a lot of women may become pre-diabetic, right? They start to notice that belly fat. And I think that a big part of that is due to the change in the body's ability to handle certain carbohydrates, certain foods, and that women are just starting to understand that they may not be able to eat the same things that they did when they were younger. So definitely a decline in the hormones is a big part of it. I think I mentioned just recently that you probably also have a decline in your muscle mass, and we all know that muscle is very metabolically active, helps to burn a lot more calories. And so when you get older, I don't know what a next percent body fat is, I won't get into that, but if you have a higher percent body fat versus your lean body mass, then you're not going to have the higher metabolism that you're used to when you're younger. And so it just becomes more of a struggle, right? Like you said, no matter what you do, right? So exercise is helpful, but it's not just cardio. I think a lot of older women are more comfortable maybe doing cardio. And this is why it's good to have people like you, Melissa, to show them about the importance of doing weight training, because it's super important to protect your muscle mass and maybe even build a little bit more muscle mass. I think some women are afraid of getting too muscular, but really that's not what we are going for. The muscle is just like, again, helps your body burn more calories. I also think that there are other big reasons why women have a hard time losing weight. Digestive issues is a big one. I think that as we get older, we're just not digesting food as well as we used to. That's why I love to use like digestive enzymes and a variety of things with older women, probiotics, because there's just so many good studies out there showing that your gut, your microbiome, it's called, is very important and has a big impact not only on your weight, but your mood. And hopefully, we'll talk about a little bit about that later, because as we kind of get older, you might become more anxious, a little bit more depressed, and all these kind of mood changes. But your microbiome has a big deal to do with your weight, as well as your mood. And a lot of women that come to me, they often tell me they have a lot of gas and bloating and just kind of either constipation and all these types of things, and that within itself, just the gut issue portion, can also contribute to weight gain, right? So there's quite a bit of things that are contributing to this: changes in the hormones, changes in metabolism, gut health. We can even talk about environmental things, and how that impacts us, but a variety of reasons why it just becomes a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, and what are the sort of things you can do about it? So you mentioned strength training,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
kind of what other steps can you do that you're really struggling to lose weight, and you seem to be gaining weight. I think that happens to almost everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's really important to get an assessment and understand what is happening specifically with your body. There's a lot of good information, on the internet about kind of generalities about what's happening in general, but really, for you to kind of get down to brass tacks and know specifically what is happening with you, you really have to get some kind of assessment. And we'll talk about labs. And I think that that's really an important piece, right? Is to really understand what is happening, with all the different types of cells in your body, your red cells, your white cells, what's happening in your gut. Like, I almost feel like I have to put out a public service announcement, because within the past few months, a lot of gut tests that I've seen, a lot of people have parasites. It's like we don't like to talk about these things, but every time I see a gut test and I see a parasite, I'm like, what is going on, right? We don't expect to see these things and talk about these things, especially in Western culture. But yeah, if a parasite is present, it's stealing your nutrients, and it could set you up to become nutrient deficient, and that's another contribution to gaining weight, right? When you don't have specific nutrients, especially magnesium, the B vitamins, really helpful for making sure that your insulin is sensitive and that kind of thing. You need all the nutrition you can get. So if you have bugs like parasites stealing your nutrients, that can be a little bit problematic.
Oh, okay, that's really interesting. So
Mhm.
what would you do about a parasite?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a whole protocol that I use. I use a variety of herbs. If you were going to a traditional doctor, they could probably put you on a certain type of antibiotic. I tend to use a lot more herbal preparations and have people maybe stay away from certain foods. But yeah, you have to address it. You really have to try your best to kind of get rid of things like parasites, get rid of really bad bacteria. I've seen a lot of what's called streptococcus. People may have heard of strep throat, but you can also have strep in your gut, right? I've seen a lot of that. Something called staphylococcus, all what are called bad bugs. And these bad bugs kind of secrete certain what are called cytokines, these kind of chemicals that can really increase inflammation in your body. And inflammation is a big one too, right? Inflammation can really contribute to weight gain, make it so that it's hard to lose weight. Because when you're in a state of inflammation, it's harder for the fat cells to kind of release, right, and release what's in them. So that's another thing I like to look at and see, like what's happening in terms of inflammation levels. And what I've been seeing recently in a lot of labs that I'm looking at is there's a lot of inflammation coming from the gut specifically. So it's really important to know what's happening. And then when you have that information, to kind of go on a protocol to get rid of it.
Yeah, because I've noticed with my own body and health
Hmm.
that my gut health has really changed over the last few years since I went through menopause, and I didn't have any problems at all.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it sort of seemed to take hold, and I became really sensitive to certain types of food. I got to watch what I eat, and then I
Yeah.
have digestion problems. I have inflammation in my body. So somebody from a bodybuilding background, which I am, so I've done, bikini competitions. I actually thought initially it was because of those competitions that I sort of got, my gut had gone off because it all happened around a sort of similar time. But then I realized when I stopped competing and it was still a year later, it's like, oh, my gut's still not right. But what happens when you do competitions is that you're very aware of inflammation in your body. You pay attention to all those things because you're trying to like get to a certain point to get to stage where you want to look your best. So you're going to notice. So I get things like I might get water retention, for example, which is like
Mm-hmm.
a sign of inflammation, isn't it, in your body? So I'm kind of really aware of it. And I just thought, you know what, I'm getting this inflammation, I'm getting these gut health problems. And I never had it at all in my entire life. So now I have to do things like take the probiotic,
Mm-hmm.
take the digestive enzymes, which I actually got that information from you, and be careful about the types of foods I'm eating. Because
Yeah.
if you have inflammation in your body, then you're not going to be able to lose weight, even if you're following my steps. So I know that Kim's come back and said that she does everything that I say. So she's strength training. And what I would say is nutrition is really, really key. And it's often the first place that I would look. So if you sort of think to yourself, well, I'm not getting results from following what Melissa says, often when you get into it, people aren't following like healthy whole foods diet. So that means like reducing or eliminating processed foods
Yeah.
and fine sugar, doesn't it? That kind of thing. So it's not about just taking your protein high, it's actually paying attention to eating. So this is why I've done this for my gut health as well. Really nutritious, good quality food. And
Yeah.
that's often, and obviously that's going to have an impact on your gut health, isn't it, as well? If
And
you're eating a lot of whole foods, fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, that's going to be a good thing. So I do think people because I work quite closely with women, and so do you, don't you, Natasha? I
mhm.
see it where they sort of come to me and they go, I'm
Yeah.
doing everything right. And then when you peel it back and
Yeah.
actually analyze it, you think, well, actually, you're not doing everything right. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, what I would add is that, another piece that I would bring to the table is really understanding that maybe what's healthy for you, Melissa, may not be what's healthy for me. And that's one reason why I often do food sensitivity testing with people, to really kind of get a good understanding as to how your body is reacting to certain foods, right? So I use what's called an IgG mediated food sensitivity test. And what it's doing is it's looking for any kind of immune reaction that a food is having in your body. And the most common foods that I see that do that are dairy and gluten, and but what's interesting is those are kind of common, but like I've had several people who they've had like an avocado or coffee or tea or things that we don't necessarily think would be problematic. In that particular person, it is problematic, right? So I always say that, at some point in your life, you want to figure out, maybe get tested and see specifically what foods, are reacting poorly in your body, and you want to maybe remove them for a while, and allow your body to kind of reduce the inflammation that's being caused by those foods. But not only that, you mentioned the digestive enzymes again, one of my aunts, we were talking about dairy, right? So she's in her 70s and she just cannot eat ice cream. She used to love ice cream, cannot really eat it, can't eat yogurt because she just absolutely cannot, digest it the way she used to. And that's common. Like there's certain digestive enzymes that kind of decline as we get older, and you can't, digest that, dairy like maybe you could in your 20s or 30s. And so or red meat. I hear that often. I can't eat as much beef as I used to, right? And so, there's a definite change, right, in your ability to digest food, but also, it's really important to know specifically, what foods are good for you.
Yeah, and that's where I guess when you're talking about the lab testing, I want to go into this a little bit more. So, what you do
Mhm.
is you do lab testing for women.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to I've put it up on the screen there where, anyone watching now, or if you're watching the recording back, you can book a free consultation call with Dr. Natasha Ryan to talk about lab testing. I've also highlighted the link in the comments at the top of the comments, so you can just go straight to the link there. But what I wanted to sort of, because what I was interested in with your lab testing, so you've got kind of like standard lab testing that they're going to test just your female hormones normally. If you're lucky, they might test your thyroid as well. So what does your lab testing involve?
Sure. So my testing is super thorough, right? I've been doing this for a long time, and what I really got is that it's really important for us to get a really good overview and understanding as to what is happening and from just top to bottom with the body. So you mentioned hormones, like, so I am extremely thorough when it comes to hormone testing. Many times, one thing of frustration for me when I speak to people on the phone, they'll go to their maybe OBGYN, and maybe, they're having symptoms of menopause, and the OBGYN might want to just kind of throw them on some kind of medication, hormone replacement therapy, whatever. And I always ask, well, did they test your hormones? Did they do any blood work or anything? And most people say no. So most people are going to the doctor. Their physician is willing to put them on medication with having no indication as to what is happening with their hormones. And that's just not happening with me. I'm not taking any action until I know specifically what is happening with you. And so when I say about hormones, I don't just mean the sex hormones. So I do mean estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, but I also mean your adrenals. I also mean a really comprehensive thyroid panel, not just your TSH. So TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone. It's one of the more common tests that are done when you go to, whether it's your primary care doctor or even certain endocrinologists. They do maybe a little bit more testing, but honestly, I probably do a lot more in-depth thyroid testing than most endocrinologists, just because I want to see certain markers that they may not, be interested in seeing, right? Especially when it comes to like things like Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I have a woman. I'm just so excited about her progress. It's incredible. She came to me because she was losing a lot of hair. Hair loss is another kind of sign and symptom of, certain hormonal imbalances. But also some women during menopause get it. But her specifically, she knew she was hypothyroid, but she didn't know she had Hashimoto's. Like they didn't do the TPO antibodies. They didn't really get deep into her thyroid labs. And so I was able to spot that she had, the Hashimoto's and a few other things within her labs. And so she's so excited because her hair is growing back, right? And so it's so important to get a good understanding, a thorough understanding of the hormones, right? So I do a lot of hormone work. I look at inflammation. I look at all the different nutrient deficiencies. I think that's so important to know specifically what's happening with the nutrients. It's like a lot of women are eating foods, but they're not actually getting the nutrients that they think they are, and that's partly because they have poor gut health, and so that leads into gut testing. I absolutely must know specifically what is happening in your gut. I do a lot of gut testing. I'm seeing a lot of parasites. I'm seeing a lot of terrible types of bad bacteria. I'm seeing something called beta glucuronidase being high. And what that is a certain type of enzyme that is secreted by bad bacteria. And what it does is there are certain types of estrogens that are slated to leave your body, whether it be in your pee and your poop. But what it does, the beta glucuronidase, is it makes it be recycled and come back into your body, which can put you, at risk for breast cancer, colon cancer, a wide variety of things, weight gain, and all these types of things, right? So it's really important to kind of get rid of those bad bugs that are kind of fueling these issues, right? I also, like we said, we talked about the food sensitivity testing. And what's great is that we're doing all this testing and I'm looking at everything at the same time. I'm not waiting on your family care doctor, your OBGYN, your cardiologist, like, because typically you might have different things done, but the doctors are not having a Zoom call to discuss your care, right? To really share information. And so what's great about doing the labs is that we get all this great information and then you have a doctor looking at it and really giving you a thorough understanding of what's happening with your health and wellness, and then giving you some suggestions on what to do about it.
Yeah, and so that's a good point for me to just pop another question, what to do about it,
Yeah.
because we got this one from Jessie Bella 01. Thank you, Jessie. And hi, I hope you're still there. And thanks for being patient if you are still there.
Yeah.
She says perimenopausal, and I'd like to know what is the food and or the supplement I can eat to take to balance my hormones.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's not just one thing, there's not just one supplement. Like I said, perimenopause can be a spectrum of things, right? So, I mean, you could deal with the sleep portion, you can deal, with the moodiness portion. There are different things that may help those things. But I would say the number one thing that you can do, honestly, is deal with any kind of insulin resistance that may be present. I say this a lot. It's not just about taking maybe some dung quai or some kind of herb, red clover. These are kind of very kind of popular herbs to take, that may be very helpful actually to help to balance the hormones. But it's really important to understand that there are going to be things in your health and wellness that will make perimenopause and menopause worse. And the number one thing is being in a state of insulin resistance or kind of being overweight before you even get to that stage in life. So really for me, there's a few things that you can do. The number one thing I think is to make sure you know what's happening with your blood sugar. Make sure you're not pre-diabetic. And if you are pre-diabetic or having any kind of diabetes issues, really important to do what you have to do. Exercise, better whole foods nutrition, as Melissa says, to really manage your blood sugars. I think that's super important with regard to perimenopause. I think it's also important to make sure that you're sleeping well. And I talked about this before when I've been visiting with you, Melissa. At nighttime, it's important to make sure you have good sleep hygiene. Make sure that the room that you're sleeping in is cool enough. Like perimenopausal people have a variety of different kind of symptoms, right? So some people may actually be having the night sweats and hot flashes. Some people may be having the moodiness. Some people might have trouble sleeping. But if those things are happening, especially with regard to the sleep, I think that that's important to manage your sleep and make sure you're doing what you can do to sleep well. So in terms of supplementation, I think that some of the better kind of supplements to help you sleep well are like magnesium is an old reliable, at least 400 milligrams of magnesium, let's say citrate, at night before you go to bed is very helpful, not only for your sleep, but it might actually help you wake up and have a morning bowel movement. So it's really helpful for your gut health as well. There's one called ashwagandha that I like. So ashwagandha is what's called an adaptogenic herb. It's really helpful for your adrenals, and the adrenal glands are super important in functional medicine just because, stress is a big part of our society, whether it's in the UK, South Africa, the United States, everybody has a certain level of stress. And so, at night, if you're just sitting there ruminating about your work, your family, that kind of thing, it's just super important to find ways to kind of like bring that stress down. And I think that ashwagandha is a great herb to do that. And then another favorite of mine is something called L-theanine. L-theanine is actually like an amino acid from green tea, but it really helps to calm you, helps to relieve any kind of anxiety and that kind of thing. So just, finding ways to kind of really ensure that you're getting a good deep sleep, because again, when you are sleeping well, that helps to mitigate some of the other issues with weight that we were talking about, right? Because when you're not sleeping well, there's so many different studies showing that poor sleep absolutely contributes to weight gain.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a big connection, isn't there? With you
Yeah,
know, the science says there's like a big
yeah,
connection. And the sort of struggle is, isn't it? Of course, it's really hard to come by,
yeah,
isn't it? When it's so you have to be. What I learned from Dr. Natasha and everyone is you've got to be intentional about sleep, haven't
yeah.
you? Is that right?
Yes, for sure. You have to make, like, I just make sure that my room is pitch black and, just very quiet. And we have a fan. So I have a fan on, just to make sure that I'm not popping up and feeling too hot. One other thing I wanted to mention about that, especially perimenopause, right? So, um, in terms of hormone replacement therapy, the one hormone that I actually think could be helpful in perimenopause is progesterone, because it's really that decline in progesterone that really is contributing to a lot of these problems, right? So, I mean, I don't typically recommend progesterone unless I've seen someone's labs, but in general speaking, there are over the counter forms of progesterone that you can use topically, that you apply at night, certain times during your period. Like if you're still having a pretty normal period, but you're in that perimenopausal space, typically days 14 through 21, at night before you go to bed, you use the topical progesterone. I actually think you should be working with someone before you start using progesterone, but it is one of the better things that can be really helpful during perimenopause. Like when you get into menopause, you have been very open about your HRT experience. That's when you really kind of get into more maybe estrogen and that kind of thing. But during perimenopause, one of the major hormones that needs to be addressed, besides insulin, is progesterone.
So I just popped up a question, but
Yeah,
you've answered it. That's why I popped the question up because I
yeah,
thought, oh, Heather's asking how I'm having a horrible time sleeping at night. I absolutely know how you feel. So
mm-hmm,
hopefully,
mm-hmm,
what Natasha's recommending, do try them because I've put them in place
mm-hmm.
because I've been on one of Natasha's workshops, haven't I, Natasha?
Yes,
And, like any woman at this stage in life, I really struggle. And I put the things that Natasha recommends in place. And it really does work. So I'm doing the ashwagandha, I'm doing the magnesium. Magnesium's a really important sort
mm-hmm,
of micronutrient, isn't it?
yeah,
And I actually do also, I have to hold my hands up. I do take hormone replacement
mm-hmm,
therapy, and I do take the progesterone at night,
yep,
which is very, very helpful,
yep,
and I'm completely open and honest about this. When I started my HRT journey, which was long after I started this channel, actually, I sort of documented it. So if anyone wants to know about that, just look at my playlist on menopause and HRT, and you can see that. But I do find that even though I take HRT, I do have to manage my sleep. It's not
mm-hmm,
going to come easily. I've got to be disciplined about not, the use of technology, for example, at night, which is another thing that Natasha talked about on her workshop. But, if you're sort of going to bed and scrolling through your
mm-hmm,
phone just before you go to sleep, you're probably going to have a really poor night's sleep.
yeah,
So it's kind of putting those things in place, isn't it? And being really, I light a candle, I make sure the room's cool, it's tidy, it's clutter free, all those sort of things. It's called good sleep hygiene, isn't
yeah,
it?
yep,
So you just kind of got to work on it. So now I've got a question here from Mellow One. Thank you very much for
yeah,
joining. Just to let you know, everyone, if you want Natasha to answer a question, we've got sort of just under another 30 minutes on this live. Please ask now, because you might not get a chance otherwise, unless you can book a free consultation call as well to talk about, getting your labs done. But if you want to ask a question now, please feel free. Now, this is from Mellow One. This is a good question
yep,
because we don't
that's,
know what HRT you're on for starters. So it'd
yeah,
be good to know. But I've got the same underlying concern in my mind was like,
yeah,
oh, do I now need to take it for the rest of my life now that I've started? So how long, if someone's on HRT, that's hormone replacement therapy.
mm-hmm.
It's generally normally estrogen and progesterone, isn't it? But it might be something different. Then how long would you be able to stay on it?
Yeah, no, it is a great question, and there's no one definitive answer, right? Because I kind of think that it depends on your genetic makeup. It depends on your family background. Has anybody in your family had cancer? You know, your immediate family. Um, so it's interesting because I used to prescribe a lot of HRT, just thousands of people over the years. And my oldest patient was like 90 something, right? So I say all that
Wow.
to say, you know, there's no hard and fast rule. Some doctors may say maybe 10 years through menopause and postmenopause, and some may say 15, or, you know, it's so honestly, I wish I could say 10 years and that's it, and then get off, right? But that's not the answer. I think it's really important to continuously get assessed and tested. You make sure that your doctor is testing your hormones a couple times a year, at minimum, right? To really see what's happening. Make sure that you're staying within physiological parameters and not like what we call supra physiological, like a lot of some clinics put women's testosterone super duper high, or, you know, that kind of thing. So you just want to make sure that the amount of hormone you're being prescribed is appropriate for you, is doing what it's supposed to do. And when you look at your labs, you can kind of see that it's where it's supposed to be and that you still kind of feel good. So again, there is not one definitive answer. It's just something that you kind of have to work out with your doctor, and just make sure that, you know, you have someone, you know, that you trust to do that.
And the thing is, if you're concerned about it,
Yeah.
book a free consultation call with Natasha, because you know I had a problem, and it's the same in the UK, it's the same in the USA. When I went to my regular doctor about starting on HRT, they didn't do any blood work. They did
No.
not do any. So they just prescribed it to me blindly.
Yeah.
And then I found out later on. So unfortunately, I can't use Natasha because I'm based in the UK, so I can't get my lab
Yeah.
work done through Natasha. Otherwise, I would. I got my lab work done here with a specialist menopause clinic. Now we have a free health service in the UK, but
Yeah.
I paid for this, paid quite a lot of money for it as well. Definitely worth the money. And then they, you know, they didn't do all the blood work that you do, I have to say, Natasha. So it's not
Hmm.
quite as thorough as you, because they just did the hormone testing. They didn't do things like insulin resistance or anything like that, or gut health.
Hmm.
But what they did deduce, even though I was taking HRT, is it actually wasn't really doing anything, because my estrogen and my progesterone, they'd taken me completely off progesterone because that was on, it was birth control. So they just took that away from me, the doctor, without, you know, and I sort of pushed back on it, and I said, well,
Hmm.
actually, don't I need it? No. So I was only on estrogen. And
Yeah.
then that's when I decided to go down the route of going, you know, going to a private clinic, because I just thought, well,
Yeah.
you know, this isn't. So I had all my blood work done, and although I was on HRT, guess what? My estrogen was really low. My progesterone was low, not surprising because
Hmm.
they'd taken me off the tablets, and my testosterone was low. This was my lab testing. It was
Yeah.
about 4 or 5 months ago, so I've got to be retested again. So she sort of put me on a different dose of everything, which has
Hmm.
made me actually feel a lot better, I have to say.
Yeah.
But it's really important that you that whenever someone's being, so I'm just kind of saying to people watching that if you're being prescribed something, it's like you shouldn't be prescribed it blindly. This
No.
should be tailored to you, and you might not need it.
Yeah.
They
And
might
you
be
brought up a
prescribing
really,
you
you brought up a
HRT,
good
and
point.
you actually don't need it. You need to actually get your nutrition in check, something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, what I was going to say is you brought up a good point, because there are a lot of women, you know, hopefully they don't do it as much these days, but there are a lot of women who are just given estrogen and they're not necessarily given progesterone. And I actually think that you really shouldn't be taking estrogen without balancing out with progesterone, whether you have a uterus or not, right? So even if you've had a hysterectomy, there are still a lot of receptor sites in your body that require progesterone. So if you're going to give someone estrogen, the two kind of work, you know, in balance. And so it's really important that if you're taking estrogen, that you also are taking progesterone as well. And more, you know, women are being placed on testosterone. I think that testosterone is an important hormone in women as well. You don't want it to be crazy high, but it's important. Testosterone is an important hormone for your brain health, for your energy, for your libido, a lot of things, right? So we don't want to completely neglect it. But it's important that you work with someone who understands these things and knows that, there's a certain balance that needs to be in play when it comes to hormone replacement therapy.
And can I ask you, I'm going to take some more questions after this, but I just think this is so important when we're talking about HRT, because
Yeah.
I know, I want to ask you sort of what your views are on it, because
Mhm.
when do you recommend it? Because I know a lot of women will say to me, I've put myself out there, so I have to take it on the chin, the sort of
Yeah.
criticism I get. But women will say, you don't need to take HRT, or they say things like, if you lived a really good lifestyle, you wouldn't need to take HRT. Then I think I do live a pretty good lifestyle, to be honest, probably better than average. And they'll say things like, it's going to give you cancer, you should avoid it at all costs. So it's got that connection, hasn't it, with cancer? So can you kind of just give us your how you manage somebody when they come to you, what are the stages where that you might think, okay, it's time to implement hormone replacement therapy?
No, it's a great question. Absolutely, for sure. And these are questions I have to ask myself because I'm kind of getting to that place, for sure. I think it's important, first of all, that I'm just not into women suffering just for suffering's sake. Okay. So if we can do something safely, there's zero judgment. There's no reason why other women, I think, should be judging another woman about doing something that's going to be safe and that's going to enhance her health and wellness. And HRT absolutely can be that for many women. And it can be a safe experience, especially if you're working with someone who really understands, what they're doing in terms of the balance of all the hormones. For me, what's big for me, I think, is like I have several women. Sometimes they call me, they ask if I can just put them directly onto hormone replacement therapy. And quite frankly, I say no, because especially if a woman is calling and she is overweight or obese and has a lot of metabolic issues, I've said this many times before. It is so important that you manage, your health and wellness first before throwing hormones on top of it, right? Because insulin resistance and all these types of things are going to make the signs and symptoms of menopause work. Where there are studies showing that if you are overweight, your hot flashes will be worse, right? And so we can't poo poo nutrition or exercise. Like, taking HRT is not going to replace, doing those things, right? But that being said, as you know, Melissa, you have been doing all those things and you are still having your symptoms, right, of menopause. So it means that for me, you kind of really maxed out your nutrition and your fitness. And then I think it's appropriate that you were worked with someone to go on to HRT to really kind of help you with your symptoms, because you had done a lot of things with regard to your health and wellness. But I think that that should be the first step. Do everything that you can with your health and wellness. And then, yes, let's look into how HRT may be helpful for you, right? Like I said, if you're in that perimenopausal stage, you don't need estrogen, right? So it's more of a matter of possibly progesterone for sure, maybe testosterone, depending on where, and not even really that much, because there are a variety of reasons why testosterone tends to be low. I think stress is one of the big ones, right? So really helping to deal with stress is an important way to kind of naturally balance your hormones or to support the systems that deal with stress. So your adrenal glands, we talked about ashwagandha, doing things like that actually helps to increase testosterone and helps to balance some of your other hormones, right? Naturally, as we get older, these hormones are going to decline. So the question becomes, do I go onto some form of HRT? And my answer is, if it is safe for you, if you don't have a really strong history, family history of cancer, if that's not a main concern for you, or if you in general overall are pretty healthy, I think that it can be a great option for women. So for me, I don't see why a woman, should not do those things if she's under her, the physician's care, who's really well versed in hormone replacement therapy. There are so many different forms of hormone replacement therapy that you can kind of get into. I have my opinions about that. There are patches, there are creams, there are pills, there's something called pellets. There's just a wide variety of different hormones. And we can get into that another time. But overall, I would say that HRT can be a safe experience for people.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you very much. Can I just clarify? So, yes, what you're saying with cancer then is that basically, if you've got a family history of it, then
You
you've
want
got
to
to
be
be
careful.
careful.
I think that you want to, so if you have a really strong, and I mean like a strong family history, like your mother, your sister had to have, a mastectomy because, they've had breast cancer, and it's your aunts, your sister, your mom, that kind of thing would give me pause, right? And should really make you think twice about certain types of HRT. Now, let's be clear, the HRT that caused cancer, there was something called the Women's Health Initiative study. I believe it was back in the 90s. Thousands of women. It was a study with a lot of nurses, and what they found was that the equine estrogens, so that the horse-based estrogens that were used, as well as what are called the progestins, it was really, and here's the thing, it wasn't even really the estrogen that was causing the cancer. It was the progestins. It was the fake progesterone, right, that they were using. So those types of hormones are being used a lot less these days. So I have to say that HRT is actually much safer now than it was 20 years ago. Okay. So it's a very different experience to go on HRT now, because a lot of the estrogen that they use hopefully is more what it's called bioidentical, right? Meaning that it
Yeah,
does not come from a horse. They're using the same biochemistry and the same shape estrogen that is found in a human body versus a horse. When you start to use the equine estrogen progesterone, that's when you really start to have issues with the proliferation of cancer in the body. But again, what also kind of fuels cancer is high blood sugars, right? Dysregulation of insulin and dysregulation of blood sugar. So all these things kind of working hand to hand, right? So if you're going to go on hormone replacement therapy, I'm biased. I think you want to consider what's called bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Like that's when you
yeah.
know that the estrogen progesterone has the same kind of biochemical shape as that what's found in your body versus it doesn't come from a horse.
I think that is sort of really good advice, and that's what I'm on as well,
Yeah.
bioidentical HRT. So
Yeah.
it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So thank you very much for sort of taking a long time to answer that. And I
Yeah.
think it's really important that people kind of understand what the pros and cons are about it. And thankfully, it's getting a bit better information about menopause generally and hormone replacement therapy and the problems that women can go through, because I think there are about 34 symptoms.
Yeah.
It's now getting a lot more, I think it's getting a high profile. And certainly here in the UK, I mean, we got somebody called Davina McCall that did a TV show that I know men are telling me they kind of sat down with their wives or their partners watching it, and it's really informed them about what the whole thing of menopause is, because it affects your whole body. It's
Oh,
not just weight gain, is it? It affects everything, your mental health, everything, your
yeah.
skin, your
Everything.
hair. You talked about your hair, didn't you? Your
Mhm.
whole body. So it's good that we're getting a bit of recognition about the difficulties that we can have at this stage in life.
Yeah, I think that it's important for us to speak about it, especially as women. Menopause and perimenopause, these massive hormonal changes impact every aspect of our life and our body. So you mentioned that. So I'll talk about your brain, right? So when your hormones start to kind of get into decline and start to change, you might have what's called brain fog. Like you walk into a room and you forget why you're there. You maybe start to forget certain words and stumble your words. Like this tremendous amount of brain fog can start to happen. What happens if you're at work and you're in the middle of a presentation and all of a sudden things start to go wrong, right? So it's really important to recognize that menopause is going to impact you at home. It's going to impact you at work. It's going to be it's going to be a big part of your life. And so you don't want to go through like half of your life almost, uh, when with half of your life not being able to cope with the changes that are happening in your hormones. So that's why I think that conversations like this are super important, so women just have some idea as to what to do. But or not, we're not solving this problem, you know, in this 1 hour live, but at least you know that there are people, you know, who you can come to talk about these things, right? I think that's important.
It's so important because yeah, it's not necessary for us to have all the answers, is it?
Hmm.
It's just feeling that you're not alone,
Yeah.
that there are other women that are going through this. This is why I do a lot of my content about it. Because I
Yes.
just think, well, you know what? I'm not perfect. I struggle just like everybody
I'm
else with
not
certain
perfect either.
things. I have, low energy levels. Oh, sorry, you've cut out on your visuals there, Natasha, but I have
Oh.
low energy levels, which I talk about on my videos and stuff. And obviously, I've been through this hormone replacement therapy journey because I suffer from symptoms. I did suffer from depression. It's like you just it's good when and one of the reasons I'm able to talk about it is I think other women in the public eye are talking about it. And I was really keen when I started on my hormone replacement therapy journey because so many people were asking me before I even started taking HRT. They assumed I was on HRT, but
Hmm.
I actually only started taking it about a year ago, just
Yeah.
over a year ago. And people just assume because I got in shape, I was on HRT, but that the reason I take it is actually nothing to do with weight loss. And in fact, I actually gained a bit of weight both times, both the first time I took it and then when I got a new higher dose,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
actually gained some weight. So, it doesn't necessarily follow, it will follow for some people that they may find weight loss because, you might have more energy to exercise and stuff like that. But it's purely really about managing my symptoms. And I started talking about it because I thought, I think some women in the public eye are hiding it. They're
Yeah.
not talking about it. They're on it. It's a bit like plastic surgery and stuff like
Hmm.
that, isn't it? It's like they're on it, they're doing it, and but they're not talking about it. So I thought if I ever do it, when I took that decision to do it, I called my doctor, and I thought I'm going to talk about it because it needs to be out in the open. And I don't care. I'm prepared to take the backlash. And most people were very supportive, I have to say. But there were some people that were really critical. And I thought, I've just got to take it on the chin. It is, it's going to be like that. But it's really important if it helps one woman who's watching my content because I was told one of the things that's really pivotal in the decision is, are your symptoms impacting on your quality of life?
Yeah.
And when the first time I went on it, I was actually having night sweats and waking up 6 times in the night,
Yeah.
and I was soaked. I was absolutely soaked.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I'm not having a good quality of life because I can never get a good night's sleep. No matter how hard I try, with all the strategies and everything, if you're waking up in a bath of sweat and it's a bit embarrassing with your partner and stuff as well, it's like you've got to sort of do something about it. So that was really the turning point for me. And then I just thought, I'm going to make video content about it and I'm going
Yeah.
to talk about it because lots of other people are probably going through this. I even wrote emails about it because I've got an email list, and I wrote emails about it, and people were emailing me back saying, thank you for sharing this. This is so funny, because I did actually tell some funny stories around it as well, because it's always good to sort of have a bit of a laugh about it. But yes, I'm going to take this question
Yeah.
here because I think it relates a bit to your consultation. So Kiki says, which hormones do you need checked for perimenopausal? Pre-diabetes and exhaustion. This is so common, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so some of the main things that you want to get checked if you are perimenopausal. And, you know, if you're going to your doctor, you want to have your basic blood work because, you know, basic blood work is something called a CBC and a chemistry panel. They look at your different types of cells. They look at your, you know, how well your liver is working, how well your kidneys work. You just want to make sure the basics are there, right? So you just always want to make sure you're getting those things done. But in terms of actual hormones, I think we talked about estrogen, progesterone. So in terms of estrogen, estradiol is the main form of estrogen. So estradiol, progesterone, testosterone. Um, I actually like fasting insulin, especially to find out with regard to prediabetes. They use something called hemoglobin A1C, which tells you, you know, how your blood sugar has been doing over about a 3-month period. So that's actually really important. You know, when you get your blood work done, you always want to do it fasting just so you can see what your fasting blood sugar is, right? I think that it should be, you know, less than 90. On the labs, it says less than 100. For exhaustion, that can be so many things. But in general, if you're going to get some basic blood work to figure out what's happening with your energy, you want to make sure you're not anemic, right? Especially if you're going through perimenopause and you've been having really heavy periods and that kind of thing. A lack of iron could be the source of feeling really tired if you're having heavy bleeding. So just making sure you're not anemic, some checking your iron. There's something called ferritin, which is the version of storage iron. So you want to just make sure that your ferritin is doing what it's supposed to do, right? So those are some of the main things. Like, I mean, in terms of other hormones, right, I would check my thyroid if you're feeling exhausted, just to kind of make sure that your thyroid is functioning well, your basic TSH. I'm sure your doctor can kind of, you know, run that pretty easily. But yeah, those are some of the things that I would probably check.
That sounds really good. And what, so the pre-diabetes, just to
Yeah,
sort of highlight that.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
connected to the insulin resistance that you
Yeah.
talked about. And can you explain a bit about what insulin resistance means?
Yeah. So to me, when you say it's resistant insulin, the hormone, basically what's happening is the pancreas secretes insulin in response to food, whether it's carbohydrates, protein, that kind of thing. It's going to release some insulin. And the insulin is necessary in order to kind of get those nutrients into the cell. But what happens is if you become insulin resistant, it means that your body has to secrete more and more and more insulin in order to do the same job, because the cells are not, you know, they're no longer really as sensitive to insulin as they used to be. Okay. And so this can be problematic just because if you have higher levels of insulin, there's studies showing that that is linked to basically weight gain, diabetes, right? Type 2 diabetes. And at least in the United States, type 2 diabetes is an epidemic. There are many people walking around who are pre-diabetic, and what that means is that your hemoglobin A1C is from 5.7 to 6.4, like when they look at the lab, right? So if you're in that kind of place, then it means that you're kind of really just about to become a diabetic. And that's how I phrase it. It's like you're literally about to become a diabetic. So what are you going to do about it? You know, when I see that, it's like it means that massive action needs to be taken, and you have to do what you have to do to kind of get out of that phase. Because when you cross over into becoming diabetic, there's just so many more problems that you have to address and deal with. You can lose your eyesight, you can lose your limbs. It's just crazy. I work in a practice 1 day a week where I see a lot of people who let their diabetes, you know, get to a terrible place and they have to lose or amputate a limb. So if you are in that pre-diabetes stage, you got to take it seriously. I think that that's super important to take it seriously, and know that again, being a pre-diabetic can make menopause worse. It will make your hot flashes worse. It will make sleeping harder. You might get what's called a neuropathy, so like tingling in your hands and feet. It's just it can be difficult to deal with. So I think that it's important to just make sure you know your status, meaning like you know where your blood sugars are and you know where your fasting insulin is.
So, Kiki, what I would recommend you do if you live in the USA or Canada is actually book your free consultation call with Natasha, so you can actually, you know, find out really about the lab testing and what you need. And the website address is there. You can see it scrolling, and I've put a direct, so it's rootcauselabs.com, and I've put the direct link right at the top of the comments. So if you look at the comments, and if you've happened to scroll down, scroll back up, and it's right at the top. And also after the live, you'll see it actually posted in the detail section underneath the video as well, the link for Natasha. So that's what, and anyone else, you know, if you're watching and you're kind of thinking, it'd be a really good idea to understand what's going on with my hormones and the rest of my body, because what we're talking about is not just, you know, Natasha's lab work, as she said, it's not just female hormone testing. There's a lot more to it. It's what she calls a deep dive into what is going on with your body. And it's so important, because you, when you've got the information and you've got the knowledge, then you know the right course of action, because it could be something to do with your gut health. There could be something that's causing, you could be eating something that's causing a lot of inflammation in your body. And if you get that resolved, you don't need to go down the route of HRT, for example, if you get that resolved. So it's just understanding what I kind of recommend, and I've said this for a long time on my channel, but not, I haven't actually said it about the full labs that Natasha does, but certainly with the female hormone testing, I've always said you need to get it done to understand that when you get to a certain age, just get it done, because it's going to give you so much information. And I'm so glad I had mine done, and it predicted when I think I was 52, that I was just going into menopause.
Right.
Because of my female follicle
So yeah, I should
yeah,
have that. Follicle stimulating hormone is another good one.
follicle stimulating
Yeah.
hormone. Sorry, we've gone just past the hour. And so, you know, it predicted that. Then I found out when I had the recent test that I had low levels of my female hormones and testosterone, which actually I've done nothing about the testosterone at the moment, because the doctor recommended just to focus on the estrogen, which was really low, and the progesterone, which you have to take, as Natasha's pointed out, with the estrogen. So, you know, but you're going to understand a lot more that's going on with your body. And everyone's an individual, aren't they, Natasha? Everybody is like different, and how they need to actually handle this is completely different.
Yes, for sure. That's why it's important to, nothing is cookie cutter, right? So we want to get the information about your body specifically, and that way, whether it's myself or someone else that you work with, can give you a very tailored protocol for you.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap up there, and I'm sorry that we didn't get to every single question. We must do this again, mustn't we, Natasha? I always love having you on my channel. We'll do it again, shall we?
Yes, just let me know. I'd love to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will talk to you guys very, very soon.